Welcome into episode 156 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
And I'm Augustrometer.
A warning from Apple to get you keyed up. How much is too much consumer protection? An Apple Watch privacy in an always-on world. Stand by for The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. A serious-sounding warning from Apple this week. No, it's not the usual update your software message, so the company did send that out as well. This one is warning people about a serious security flaw in the way iOS handles third-party keyboards. Now, let's stop there. iOS comes with a keyboard. Why might people install third-party keyboards as well?
Well, originally Apple had just their standard keyboard, but other companies were coming out with keyboards that made typing faster or easier or smarter. The Swipe keyboard, for example, which was on Android first. Apple is adding some of those capabilities themselves nowadays, but people become used to a product and stick with it. So if they have a keyboard that they like, they're going to keep using it.
They might have even forgotten that, the keyboard that they have wasn't one that was built in, which seems like a possibility too.
Exactly.
Now, according to a support document from Apple, third-party keyboard extensions in iOS can be designed to run entirely standalone without access to external services, or they can request full access to provide additional features through network access. Apple has discovered a bug in iOS 13 and iPadOS that can result in keyboard extensions being granted full access even if you haven't approved this access. And when I first read this, I thought, well, that's always been one of my concerns with third-party keyboards, that they were, taking my information and sending it off to someone else. Kind of like what we talk about here, letting developers see how an app is used so that they can make improvements. But the thing is, in rereading that, the part that jumped out was the part that should have jumped out in the first place, the part where it says, they can have full access even if you haven't approved this access. Full access sounds pretty self-explanatory, but let's just go ahead and spell it out. When we say full access, what are we talking about?
Basically, we're talking about all the bad things you can imagine a keyboard doing. Password tracking, account tracking, etc. And it sends it potentially sends this information back to a server somewhere else. With this bug, all that can be done without you knowing about it. It's a really scary bug. I think Apple is being very transparent about it, and that's great. I'm sure they're working on a fix. That's what they said that they're doing. But I'm also pretty sure somebody got fired at Apple for introducing this bug.
It's a hard one to wrap our minds around, especially because we don't really know, what's going on with it. I hope that we learn more. In the meantime, though, we'll work with what we've got. I had a Swipe keyboard a few years ago, and after this story hit, I wondered whether I still had that on my phone and just forgot about it. Luckily, Apple offers instructions for seeing what keyboards you do have installed. Mr. Trometer, will you please tell us how that's done?
Oh, of course. Any keyboard you've installed can be seen in the Settings app. If you open Settings, then go to General, then Keyboard, and finally tap Keyboards, this will list any third-party keyboards you have installed.
Now, do you have any third-party keyboards installed on your phone?
I don't. I've never deviated from the Apple standard ones. And with iOS 13, they introduced the Swipe keyboard, that's Apple's.
Right.
But even that, to me, I'm still trying to get used to it because I just type.
Yeah, well, no, honestly, their new Swipe technology or whatever they've got, whatever they're calling it, because I don't think they call it Swipe, because if memory serves, there are actually two other companies that call their Swipe keyboards Swipe keyboards. But this one's really great. It works very well, and I keep forgetting it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I use it, it's fantastic. But then a lot of times I'm like, tapping and making mistakes. I'm like, oh yeah, I should just be doing the swipe thing like they designed. The reason I asked if you had a third-party keyboard is the one thing that I was wondering is what does a third-party keyboard look like as far as in that list of keyboards? Like when I went to check, the two that I had are, Apple's regular keyboard, the QWERTY keyboard, and then the emoji keyboard. But those are both, built into iOS. It's just
Sure.
I've made the emoji one turn on, I guess, which I don't even remember doing, or maybe that's something that's there automatically. What I'm trying to figure out is how would somebody know that a third-party keyboard was a third-party keyboard, but maybe I'm just being silly thinking that somebody might have forgotten.
Well, if it's not one of those two, then it's a third-party keyboard.
Well, yes, except
quite honestly.
Except I have a friend who's learning Japanese through Duolingo, and so she's got a Japanese keyboard, but it's still from iOS. Anyway, I mean, look, if you go back in there and there's one that's all beer cans, okay, that's probably a third-party keyboard. If at this point there is a swipe or something like that listed in your keyboards, that is a third-party keyboard now, because there's nothing special about Apple's built-in keyboard that says swipe. It's just something that's happening now in iOS 13. Which, by the way, leads to a question. If somebody does find a third-party keyboard hanging out, maybe one they use, maybe one that they forgot about, what should they do?
Sure. As I mentioned before, if you're looking at your keyboard list in the settings app, once you see the list of keyboards your phone is using, or your iPad, you can tap the edit button, which will then give you the option to delete it. So if you see a keyboard there that is either unfamiliar or that you're not using, feel free to just go ahead and delete it.
Now, I'm wondering, is the concern here that the makers of the third-party keyboard apps are up to no good? Or is it that the flaw exists and a fourth party could somehow access information unbeknownst to either the keyboard maker or the user?
Well, it's hard to know what third-party keyboard makers have been doing up to this point. If it's a bug, it's a bug. And if they've discovered that bug and are taking advantage of it behind your back, it's really hard to know whether or not that's happening. I honestly think this is more of a situation where the flaw is public, and a third-party keyboard may take advantage of that flaw now. So if you installed something, if the beer can keyboard, the likelihood of them doing something nefarious is probably a lot higher than some of the other keyboards that have been around for a while, especially if it's a brand new one. If you use a non-Apple keyboard, just make sure the company that makes it is on the up and up.
Apple does say, as you pointed out a moment ago, an upcoming software update will fix the issue, though it doesn't say when that's coming out. I'm wondering if you and I could actually do a tiny bit of speculating. Apple came out with iOS 13 a week ago today, as we post this show. Apple released a major update, iOS 13.1, just a couple of days ago. Does the fact that Apple knew about this but couldn't implement a fix before the 13.1 release give us any indication of, I don't know. I mean, does the lack of a fix mean that the flaw is particularly bad or insidious, or is it just that they found it too late to include a fix this time around?
Well, we don't know exactly when they found out about it, but software updates do take a little bit of time. And it's not just the development, but it's also the testing. And that testing for the iPhone and iOS is across many devices, meaning all of the different phones and iPads. And if you think about it, if you go back just 5 years, that's, dozens of pieces of hardware that they have to test on and make sure that whatever fix they introduce doesn't make things worse. So it does take time. They could have also just found about this recently and just wanted to get out in front of it and let people know that, hey, this is a thing and we're working on it.
Now, you've heard us say all the way through third party, third party, third party. This issue does not impact Apple's built-in keyboards, according to the company. So if you've never installed a third-party keyboard, you have nothing to worry about from your keyboard. You do have to keep worrying about every other thing in your online life, though. So I came across a kind of interesting opinion piece on the Next Web earlier this week that hit on a lot of topics that we cover here, though in more of a philosophical way. Mark Thompson is a co-founder of Pay Kickstart, which bills itself as a leading software-as-a-service firm that is reinventing how startups and businesses sell online. So Mr. Thompson is in e-commerce. Now, I assume that he was in e-commerce in Europe based on the headline of his piece. Why is the EU adding a painful extra step to your online shopping? Though contact info for Pay Kickstart lists it as Indiana-based, while Thompson's Twitter profile has him in the Research Triangle in North Carolina. He's really bothered, though, by something happening in the EU. He starts by listing a number of consumer protections and privacy protections the EU has implemented over the last few years, including strict cookie policies, GDPR, which we've talked about a lot here on this show, and laws that regulate returns and refunds of online purchases. What's got his goat today, though, is something called Strong Consumer Authentication, or SCA. According to Thompson, who I guess it's worth remembering is against this idea, according to Thompson, generally the SCA states that all EU-based businesses that accept online payments must build an additional authentication step into their checkout flow. In practice, this means that after clicking the complete purchase button, the buyer must once again confirm the transaction, either by entering a password, a code sent to one's phone, using face recognition, or in any other way. Now, while acknowledging that the SCA is expected to reduce online fraud and make payments more secure, Thompson goes on to say, but what's just one extra step for the consumer, a click to accept cookies, receive marketing emails, or confirm a transaction? That's another obstacle for the seller to closing a sale or getting the lead. This can significantly impact the business's conversion rates and revenue. Speaking as a consumer, as somebody who doesn't sell online, boo-hoo is sort of my immediate thought. And here's the thing, I have since talked to a small business owner who is a friend of mine who's like, yeah, GDPR was really tough on us. And his thought is anything that sort of presents itself as a hurdle presents itself as a hurdle. And yet I find myself wondering, I mean, this is the kind of thing that we as consumers should want, isn't it?
It's really the dilemma we all face. You have a choice between easy and safe. And in this case, yes, it adds an extra step. Is it bad for retailers? Yep. Is it good for consumers? Yep. I do get a whiff of agenda from the opinion piece. I don't know anything about Mr. Thompson, but it feels like there's some commerce going on that he doesn't want to interrupt, and that, this new law is going to take a bite out of his paycheck. And I understand that, but at the same time, it's offering consumers better protection.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I get the desire for convenience. I mean, nobody hangs around outside an inconvenience store, right? Nobody's selling anything, promoting a feature, this will make things more difficult for you. But with fraud and online crime on the rise, it's hard to see how Thompson can make this case, except, of course, he is in e-commerce. I mean, I get what he's saying. And again, my friend who I was talking to earlier is like, yeah, anything that slows somebody down is a chance for them to walk away from the sale. At the same time, this is basically what we're suggesting to everyone when we say turn on 2FA wherever you can, right? I mean, it makes things feel less convenient, but it also makes them more secure.
That's the tough thing with any sort of security, be it online or otherwise. How important is the thing you're trying to protect? And is it worth it to take that extra step? It's always a balance. And honestly, sometimes you choose convenience over security. That's your choice. If I had to agree with anything that Mr. Thompson says, I just think the government is making the choice for you here. And I don't really agree with that.
Don't misunderstand. By the way, Thompson makes some points worth considering, in my opinion. I mean, this whole thing is worth considering, which is why we're talking about it here. He cites a quote from former Alibaba CEO Jack Ma, who said, "Europe, everything you do follows rules and laws. Everything you think about when you start to worry, you make rules and laws." Thompson says Ma believes that the amount of restricting rules is the main reason why the U.S. and China are way ahead of Europe in terms of technology and innovation. No matter how you look at it, Thompson says, every new regulation not only slows down innovation, but also hinders growth. Strict restrictions can make it more difficult for companies to grow their businesses as well as keep them afloat. For example, he continues, even though the earlier mentioned SCA requirement will only slightly complicate the consumer's checkout experience, that could still lead to a significant drop in conversions, by which he means sales conversions. Somebody who was interested may not go ahead and commit because of that one extra step. The thing is, to me, that seems like an argument better suited for 1997 than 2019.
Well, like I said, I don't like that the government is getting involved, but I agree that there are places in the world where the restrictions do hinder progress. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's really hard to say.
Okay, but can we assume that more safety measures, restrictions, as Mr. Thompson might call them, can we assume that more consumer protection measures are the way of the future?
Unfortunately, I think that they are, but I feel like rather than dictating process and procedures, like having to respond to a code or, verify via an email or whatever, I'd rather see the laws go after bad actors instead of forcing companies to do certain things to keep consumers safe. Go after people that purposely didn't make consumers safe instead of saying you have to do things our way because we're the government and we know better than technology companies. This would allow good companies to keep being good, and it would force bad companies to change their ways.
See, it's interesting, although there are things that I began to think about then, like there was nothing wrong with what Uber was doing until somebody found out about it, right? The whole thing where Uber was tracking people while they're walking around, right. Nothing illegal about it, and then, I get what you're saying and I don't disagree, and yet I don't necessarily agree either. Here, let's do it this way. What's the solution? For business. Let's say that more steps are the way forward, more hurdles, to use Thompson's term. If that is what's going to happen, then what's the solution?
Well, I'd like to think that each generation is smarter when it comes to online security. So your grandmother might appreciate the extra step, but your daughter won't. Some of that is just being around the internet and understanding the risks. There's also a wave of new technologies that make security a lot more convenient. Biometrics are a super important part of that, whether it's your fingerprint or face scan or iris scan or whatever comes next. The bottom line is, as you mentioned, no one wants inconvenience from retailers to consumers. Technology, I think, will get us there eventually. I'm not sure laws like this help, but they do shine a light on the problem. And if there's a light being shined on the problem, then there are going to be companies that are looking to try and solve that problem. And I like that.
We'll glance at our watches in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. That thing you shouldn't have opened, you went and opened it, didn't ya? That link you shouldn't have clicked, you clicked it. Now you've got something slowing down your Mac, maybe skimming data, maybe mining crypto. Maybe you didn't even do anything. You just visited a site that attached a few tracking cookies. There are lots of things out there that you neither want nor need on your computer. To eliminate them, there's MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by Secure Mac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your computer. Keep your machine clean with MacScan 3 from Secure Mac. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. That's MacScan 3 by Secure Mac. Your 30-day free trial is waiting at securemac.com/MacScan. We'll wrap the day with a new feature for Apple Watch and the privacy and security concerns around it. Always On. Apple Watch Series 5, released last week, has an always-on display. People say it's a game changer. Cult of Mac says it's the one huge new feature in the Apple Watch Series 5. But here's the thing. People get notifications on Apple Watch. They might be reminders. They might be prods to close your rings. They might be calls you're receiving or messages in text that you don't want to flash around. How does Apple's always-on display not display all things to everyone? Cult of Mac has two options. The nuclear option of killing the always-on display, and the other option involves employing a privacy-minded setting. Now, taking the quick and easy route, how would one turn off always on?
Well, like the iPhone, the watch has its own settings app. If you press the digital crown to display all of your apps, and then you find the settings app, tap on that, then scroll through the options until you see the option of display and brightness. If you tap that, you'll see the ability to toggle the always on display on or off. If you turn it off, your watch will behave like previous watches and the screen won't always be on.
Okay, and as for leaving the display on while maintaining your privacy, it's not surprising actually that there is a switch for that.
In the same section of the settings app, you can also hide sensitive complications. If you hide them, Apple says sensitive complications data, such as your next calendar appointment, mail messages, and heart rate, can be hidden when your wrist is down.
Now, I said earlier that it's not surprising that Apple makes that, that simple. What is surprising is that they didn't say anything about that at the media event when they announced the always-on display. Like, I was talking it over with a friend of mine, and we're like, I don't want everybody to see everything. Kind of weird they didn't even mention that, okay, well, everybody doesn't have to.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd like to say it was an oversight, but at the same time, if it's an oversight, why did they put those options there? For a company so supposedly focused on privacy, you'd think they'd at least made a passing mention of it.
Apple has this weird sort of like utopian idea about technology, though, sometimes. And I know that seems obvious because it's Apple. But I remember when Steve Jobs announced the iPad, he was like, that's just going to be on the coffee table and everybody can pick it up and look at it. And I thought, wow, I don't know what you smoked this morning, but no, that's very personal. Nobody, if I have an iPad, I have an iPad. And if my kids want to use my iPad, I'll be buying my kids an iPad because I don't even know what I'm going to be doing with it, but no. And so, that's the one thing I thought of when I found out, they have all these privacy settings. They're just not telling you about it. It's almost like, they just like to present this idea like, nobody has anything that they want to keep private. I mean, yes, we're building our reputation on privacy these days, but you're cool, right?
I trust you. It's fine. Go ahead. Here's my passwords.
Exactly. Because, it could be your bank sending you your password. And I'm pretty sure that's on the up and up, too. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is securemac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for this show, for the last show we did, all the shows all the way back to the first one, and you can actually listen to every show right there as well. The place to do it all is securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. The address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.